Hi, and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of TNT, the KCAL Kids. I'm Ty Justice.
I'm Todd Fox.
And we're here reviewing some of the greatest cartoons ever made, showing you how great it was to grow up a millennial. And today we're going to start out in the KCAL Kids Corner with the 1927 Oswald the Lucky Rabbit short, Poor Papa. Now, this was the very first cartoon that Walt Disney had a hand in creating that was a huge hit. It also later on taught him a lot about business because Oswald would eventually be stolen from him through Universal, and it's why he became so protective of his properties later on. But because of this being stolen from him, he had to come up with his own character, and that's where we got Mickey Mouse.
Correct.
But the very first cartoon that Oswald had anything to do with was Poor Papa, 1927. Unfortunately, it wasn't released until later, and the first Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoon that really got released was Trolley Troubles. Trolley Troubles was the very first one actually released, but the very first Oswald short made was Poor Papa, which was an interesting little short that had kind of a pedigree without them knowing it when it came to who was involved, because the animation was done by Ub Iwerks, a frequent Disney collaborator, Hugh Harman, Les Clark, Friz Freeling, Ben Compton, Norman Blackburn, and Rollingham Hamilton. But half of these guys would either go on to work, or all of them in general would either continue on with Disney or start their own animation studios. Ub Iwerks did for a while. Hugh Harman and Ising. Friz Freeling became a huge director at Warner Brothers. So, I think it was Freeling that was asked, like, why did you quit working with Walt and working for Disney? It was because he treated us like crap and paid us even worse. So that was the story behind that. But the story behind this, or at least the plot of this short, is pretty simple. It's, Oswald, kind of chewing on a corncob pipe, waiting in his house for his wife to give birth.
Mm-hmm.
And then she gives birth, and the way they handle that is storks start coming in and dropping tons of babies. And when the doctor comes in, and when Oswald's like, "Well, how many babies?" He keeps doing this, and Oswald's like, "No, too many." And it's a cuter short than I thought it would be.
Yeah, it's multiple, pelicans coming in there with
storks.
I'm sorry,
it's okay.
Storks coming in there with sacks of rabbits, and it just keeps coming. So it's the PC version of showing how things are created, and obviously as they come in, they fly in. He's had it up to here with it because there's certain his little offspring, however many they are, keep getting into trouble, finding new ways to
drive him crazy.
Yeah, create havoc, dude.
Right? You have kids, you know how that is.
I never like Oswald swatted them with what is it called, fly swatters,
right?
And so
they were putting pins under his seat and driving him crazy, messing up stuff.
And musically, they were already ready. They were playing trumpets, and hitting the big old drums.
They're like protesters. That's amazing. So when the second batch of storks starts coming in, and we know this because Richard Wagner's Ride of the Valkyrie starts playing, because this was a new orchestration, because this was a lost Oswald short for a long time. People thought it didn't exist until a few years ago when 3 copies of it were finally found. And so there was a new score made for it, or composed for it. And when Wagner's Ride of the Valkyrie starts up, the storks start flying in with more bindles full of babies, not just one each, because, Oswald at this point is fed up, gets his shotgun, and starts shooting on the roof to try and dissuade the storks from bringing any more babies into his house and ruining his life any more than it already was. So he hits one, and then it drops the bindle, and of course doesn't kill the stork, and the babies, multiple little bunnies, are in this sack, and they use it as a parachute and still find their way down into his house through a pipe, which he then knots and thinks, okay, no more. They can't get in through this pipe in my roof anymore. Until they start dropping the babies off in a water bin or a water basin that flows to his house. And this is kind of a very old style house, even for 1927. And, because, Oswald himself is like, churning butter.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if he was raised in a barn at that point, too. Right. So, like a good Midianite.
Or Mennonite.
Mennonite there. I would just, like, with the way that his offspring were coming in, it almost was like, not to go too technical or too out there, but like, how like you fertilize a woman, like only one gets to the egg usually, maybe two if you're unlucky or lucky, however you want to call it. But it seems like every one of his made that egg.
Right.
And they multiplied.
And they were horrible.
Yeah, he unleashed a horde of little Oswalds.
And they kept coming in. And unfortunately, this was seen as derivative by Universal.
You think?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. And when I read that at first, I thought, well, this is going to be dull. They're going to be reusing the same gags over and over again. And they kind of did.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's funny when you watch, because I've seen Trolley Troubles before. And because when Disney finally reacquired the rights to Oswald, I think in 2006, it took them decades to get Oswald back under the Disney umbrella. There was a Disney treasure set put out where it's just dedicated to all of Oswald. They still hadn't found, though, I don't think Poor Papa at that point because it's not on that set. But from that to Trolley Troubles, I could see the jump in quality and what they were doing. And you saw a little glimpse of it earlier because we were screening Poor Papa. And after that rolled up, of course, Trolley Troubles. And what they were doing there was a little more innovative, and it was a little different. And, working with the camera angles and, just the direction and perspectives, it did get better. So, the Universal executive, Mintz, I think his name was, he said that it was, Charles Mintz said that it was too old. He looked too old, and they were just reusing some of the same gags too often, which, is true. But it was still done. It was better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, because for a main character, even if you go over to the Warner Brothers side and you got Bugs Bunny, he appears to be, 20s, 30s, maybe.
30s.
He's not really an old guy at all. And you
20s. Yeah, the character.
Yeah, the character. And then you look at Mickey Mouse, he's the same too. He's something, not too far removed from high school even. At certain points in his, maturation as a character.
Yeah, they're youthful.
Yeah, and then that's why I noticed right away with Oswald, he looks like he's late 40s with, have hundreds of kids coming in.
He's having kids, you know what I mean? So he's having kids, can work a shotgun, and has a corncob pipe. So there was definitely
He's been through a war.
He's been through a war. He definitely has. He's seen things.
Yeah, exactly.
Dark things. But he definitely, is an older character, and they wanted something with a little more pop that didn't just feel old. Even then, they're like, make him young. Let's appeal to that
make him sleek looking too.
Yeah.
Because I don't know of too many characters in any kind of cartoon genre that are old. That are mostly like the main character. Like you could argue maybe Homer or something like that.
But that's the premise of it, though.
Yeah.
This I think just didn't work for Universal for obvious reasons. And later on, there are characters that do have families. Donald, for one. Let's say Donald Duck, because he did have the nephews. So he was an uncle. He was an uncle character, and he was in the Navy. So they did kind of age the characters up in certain ways. But I think they were kind of right about this, because when you see Trolley Troubles later on in the rest of the Oswald shorts, which we'll get to, there's definitely a little bit more of that youthful vigor and mischievousness in his nature, and he seems more Felix the Cat than just some old fuddy-duddy having kids shooting at storks.
That's a good comparison. Right. Yeah, I could totally see the Felix thing.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's interesting. But yeah, that was Poor Papa, and that was the first. And we're going to start talking more about these Oswald shorts, because I wanted to start us at the beginning and go through chronologically all the Disney shorts, because we love them all. There's always something great. But I think it's great to start at the beginning with these, like we are with the Disney block. But
absolutely,
yeah, that was our KCAL Kids Corner for today, and now we're going to start the Disney Afternoon block, or Disney Afternoons, with Ducktales. And we're still in the pilot season for these shows, but now we're in episode 2 of everything. And episode 2 of the pilot episode, that was actually a 5-part mini movie, is called Wronguay and Wronguay. So this is where Huey, Dewy, Louis, and Scrooge travel to South America to search out the lost treasure that everybody's after. And it was quite interesting. There's a lot of Latin portrayals in there.
Yeah, they go on this crusade, and first of many opportunities to use a treasure map.
Yep.
And to get into hijinks and things like that. And
this was on the ship. This was on the little ship they found.
Yeah. And they're going to find plenty of treasure maps in that way, or there's going to be different ways of, even though he's so rich in this series, he's got that. The only other thing that can motivate Scrooge McDuck is a good adventure.
Right.
And that's where the boys come in, because obviously in this episode they're stuck in at the mansion. They want to get out again. That's sort of the premise of the first few episodes.
Right. And the interesting thing is, the show really kind of points, because it was the 80s. The show was created in 87, and that's when these were first screened. And it does talk about like avarice and greed, because, Flintheart Glomgold is in this as well. And he is, it's him and Scrooge trying to find this treasure on this little ship.
And he's the Scottish version?
Scottish.
Yeah. He's got that real deep accent.
Yeah, because they're both Scottish ducks, which is kind of interesting. But Flintheart Glomgold, with the name Gold at the end of it, I wonder if they were trying to infer that he was Jewish. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
Scottish Jew? I don't know.
It's a Jewish suffix, silver, silverman, silver, gold, things like that. Fish, whatever it might be. But I see that name like, were they doing something? Was that interesting, or is that just subconscious? It may have just been like gold. And
possibly. I wouldn't put it past them.
Right, but it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But this episode is interesting because it does show Scrooge, the character, as just an adventurer, but now he's starting to rely on the boys because they save him a few different ways in this episode, and he's going to fall off the cliff at one point when they're searching inside the cave for this ship that is a replica of the ship that they're looking for. And the old captain, the old Spanish captain, because he's like, eventually, spoiler alert, he's like, was a conquistador, this guy, because he's like hundreds of years old. And they're looking for his ship because it is his ship. And when they do find it, they do find the gold and all that. It leads Huey, Dewy, and Louis and Scrooge to be closer, adventure buddies. He's got his little companions. But at the same time, this show is a show it's about the balance of wealth, adventure, and family, which is kind of funny. And it starts to bloom and blossom a little more in this episode. And in the next episode, we'll see an introduction of different characters that further humanize the boys. In kind of the same way that Aunt Harriet did in Batman from the 60s. Because the reason they put Aunt Harriet in the Adam West Batman series, because at first it was just all guys. It was Batman, Robin, and Alfred. And the executives are like, people are going to think they're gay. Let's throw a woman in there. So they threw in Aunt Harriet. And, for whatever, for good or bad, but they threw her in there and she helped balance that show. But, everybody knows that she's a beloved character in that show. And just like Mrs. Beakley and Webbigail are going to be coming up in this series as well.
Yeah, they're interesting side characters. Obviously, you can feed off of them too. So the more characters you have, you don't want a huge amount, but you do want enough characters to where you can have side stories, side quests, or play off of that particular side character for an entire episode. But this episode reminded me a lot of the Goonies in a way.
It sure did. Yeah.
And I really like the way, like you said, Huey, Dewey, and Louie were also, using their Junior Woodchuck type stuff this one.
Because in the last episode, a Junior Woodchuck salesman came to the Scrooge and he's like, hey, would you like to donate? Because it shows that Scrooge doesn't donate to anyone. But then he figured out a way that it would be good for the boys to keep them occupied. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And so that's where they get the Junior Woodchuck Guidebook, which is like, the what is it for
Boy
kids?
Scouts.
The Boy Scouts, like the Boy Scouts in their universe.
Throughout this series, this is going to come up a lot because it's going to come down to merit badges. And it's going to come like when they get stuck in a situation like where Scrooge is like really rich, business savvy, maybe exploration as well, tech savvy in a way. It'll come down to something simple when they're out in the outback or they're traveling somewhere and the boys come up with a way to start a fire or have help
according
them with
to the
shelter.
Junior Woodchuck Guidebook.
Exactly, that's going to play a huge part.
It's Deus Ex Machina. A lot of times it kind of saves the day.
Yes,
because it's a way for them to fix a situation that they have no idea about fixing. Because in some shows, it's like, well, we suddenly know how to do this kind of engineering thing, and in this show they gave you a practical way to kind of get them out of trouble.
Yeah, it's like a huge Bible, the Junior Woodchuck Guidebook, and they look through it and it's like, there's a page for this.
It kind of is. So says Duck Jesus. Mallard Christ. But it's...
So you're not going to like how we're going to get that venom out of you, Scrooge.
Right. Move the tail feathers to the left, and there we go.
It says in the guidebook.
Right. It's in the book, the scripture. But no, that is going to be common coming up. But it's used in good effect. It's not too tiresome. But the funny thing about this episode that I noticed is that it kind of ends. This could have been a 2-episode pilot, and they would have been fine because at the end of this, they find the ship they're looking for. They find the gold, and it's a treasure ship full of gold. everyone's storyline is kind of taken care of. I don't know if you've noticed that, but at the end they're kind of like happy ending, and then they won. The wheezy Spanish conquistador comes back. Because they think that was a horrible impression, but they think I haven't had enough time to work up a good one for him, but they think he drowned with the ship. And because he's a miserly character that's way worse than both Flintheart, Glomgold, and Scrooge put together. Because it's seemingly Scrooge and the boys lose the bet that's made in this episode that Scrooge says to Flintheart, like, I'll get the treasure first, or before you, and then Flintheart's like, no, you won't. Like, well, whoever does it's gonna have to eat my hat. And so, at the very end, just to kind of mess with the boys after they, after the boys and Scrooge after they lose, because Flintheart and the El Capitan steal the ship back from Huey, Dewy and Louis and Scrooge, who technically find the ship. Flintheart flicks a coin down to the little lifeboat that they put the boys and him in, and he's gloating that they won the treasure ship, and I'll give you this little coin though. Whoever wins the most treasure from this wins. So when the ship sinks, Scrooge still has that coin, but when he flicks that off, El Capitan's like, my gold, and then he turns on Flintheart and tries to blow him up with a cannon, and ends up sinking the ship. That's how the boys and Scrooge end up winning. And, Scrooge actually wins the bet because he keeps that coin. Yeah. But at the end, everybody's happy. It's fine. And then all of a sudden, the little El Capitan floats up. He goes, I will get you. So that's not the end of it. And it says, to be continued. But... it continues for 3 more episodes, technically. But it could have ended there, and everything would have been fine.
Yeah, he could have came back at another point, like most of these shows do. Like, there's sort of like a cooling off period.
Right.
And then all
reoccurring villain.
Yeah, and all of a sudden the villain's like, you know what? It's been a few episodes. I'm going to strike those kids again.
Like the Beagle Boys. They were a constant threat to Scrooge. But that was episode 2. And it was kind of interesting at the end that I thought, well, yeah, they could have really ended it perfectly there, and it still would have been fine. But they went on a little bit, their adventures were a little more interesting in the next few episodes because the treasure they thought they were looking for is much smaller in comparison to what's on the horizon. Yeah. But next is going to be the second episode of Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. And I used to always say Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers as a kid. I don't know if you did or you said it right. You probably said it right. But, I've come to find out it's Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. Yeah. But there's no comma, there's no colon, so somebody screwed that up. But yeah, this is going to be the second episode in their pilot series. Again, a pilot movie that was like 4 or 5 episodes long that was cut down into like 5 different episodes. But this one is called Rescue Rangers to the Rescue Part 2. So pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, this one they get their first case.
Yep.
Like we're actually, what was it? Is it Bridget? I'm blanking on the names.
Gadget.
Gadget's like, we're gonna take the case, and she said,
wait, was that the third one though? Because she wasn't introduced yet, was she?
Wasn't she on? Oh, am I skipping ahead?
No, Monterey Jack was introduced.
Yeah. That was the first one he was in the.
Yeah. So episode 2, Monterey Jack comes in. They introduce the characters kind of slowly.
Yeah. And so it was like one at a time. I think he came in with the bee, right?
The fly, Zipper.
Zipper, yeah.
Zipper, yeah, because he goes zip, zip.
Well, this is where Nimnal makes his first appearance as well, which reminded me that character as being like a mad scientist, like against animals and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But he reminded me a lot of Dr. Robotnik.
Yeah, the kind of a similar look, red hair, the Irish
balding head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of fascinating that because these guys watch each other's work, so of course But
this guy was shorter.
Right, he was shorter and a little less intimidating.
Exactly,
definitely a smaller mustache.
Mm-hmm.
But no, this was an interesting episode continuing on. But what I found interesting in this one, I don't want to say uncomfortable because I don't want to be all too PC about it. But this was again 1990. 1991. They had a lot of Asian stereotypes in this one. Because they went to the Chinese laundry, and there are Siamese cats everywhere, Chinese fish, Asian stereotypes for these fish. There's a Bruce Lee type fish in there as well, as they're trying to do all this because Fat Cat, the villain in this one, is trying to he's trying to basically, I think, take control of all the fish to control all the cats, so he's got this big plan and this big boat, and the Rescue Rangers are trying to free their friends, the dog that they know and his human companion that are actually retiring from the police force, and they stumble onto this adventure. But at the same time, it's interesting because you try to watch it with the right perspective now. You're like, well, it was a different time. And it was, but you watch it now and it's a little cringeworthy. You're like, oh, that wouldn't fly today.
Yeah, Disney would not pass this one, but it was one of those things where it's like back in the day, Disney would find a specific city or a specific genre and they play off of it. You know, a specific stereotype too. So we've seen that in some of the other cartoons we've been previewing lately too. It's like, whoa, they said some stuff that wouldn't fly today, but that's how these things go. Sometimes, again, people say Disney classics are great, and they are, but they are also can be dated at times. They can be, it could be a certain way of speech or a way they depicted a certain group of people was way different than what we do now. So I think you take it with a grain of salt, like you said. It's like one of those where you just like, hey, let it roll off, but you still acknowledge it, like, whoa.
I know, because when you read, writing about it is one thing, but then when you're actually watching it, you just go, oh, that's a little bad. That's problematic. But again, do I think these things should be pulled off the air or hidden? No, of course not. No. I mean, it was what it was, and why are millennials racist sometimes? Maybe it's the cartoons. I'm just kidding. But no, that was an interesting part of it. And one thing I noticed in this one that I didn't pay attention to before is that on Disney Plus, the aspect ratio is 1:8:5. So they cropped them. And that's happening a lot with certain cartoons once they're remastered, But the Blu-rays they put out, oddly enough, of all the shows of the Disney block, Disney officially put out Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. I picked it up, of course, and when it came out, and the episodes are thankfully 4:3. They're the original aspect ratio. So it's just an odd thing. Maybe on Disney Plus, like The Simpsons, you can choose which aspect ratio you can watch them on, which is nice.
I haven't explored that.
Yeah, I haven't either. But if you have, in the comments, please let us know. And of course, subscribe. Yay! Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, keep us going, and comment your memories of what we're talking about. But that was the second episode. It ends, of course, on a cliffhanger, as they all do, because
gotta keep it going.
They gotta keep it going. And as this fat cat is being defeated, I think there's a boat coming at the crew because they thought Monterey Jack had died. But actually, he was not drowned, after all, after they make their escape into the ocean, after fighting their way through a lot of cats. And he comes back on a bottle that is a bottle with a ship inside of it, like those
the ones you put together.
Yeah, the ones you build yourself, and which was kind of a neat little touch there. And then of course, they look up and a ship's coming at them, and it's to be continued. But they are on their quest to try and stop Fat Cat and, like you say, Nimnal from his devious plans for them and for the world. And we'll get more of that later on. And for now, we're going to work our way toward Tailspin.
Yes. And
Tailspin episode 2 is interesting because that's where a lot of the characterizations for the latter part of the series came from. You had the plot point come in that Baloo loses his license to his dock and his plane.
He owes a lot of money.
So the bank, and I was like, what drug dealers does he owe money to?
Like, bro, what were you using that money on?
I know. What were you transporting before?
It's all hookers and coke.
Hookers and coke. That's what Louis' bar was all about. It was a bar.
Possibly, right?
I mean,
right?
Hey, what happens in the ocean at Louis' bar stays at the ocean.
King Louis, by the way.
King Louis, that's right. A little side note on that: the actor I read that played the original King Louis, which is why they got it away from doing exact copies of the voices from the movies, is because the original actor sued because he wasn't getting a lot of money on the residuals for home video for the Jungle Book, which Disney fought against home video at first, and then when they found out how much money was to be had, they got into it. But then, of course, I think there were a couple of other singers that sued them as well. I think, was it Patsy Cline or no? She was in Lady and the Tramp. He's a tramp. Do-do-do-do. Anyway. I'll cut that part out. That was terrible. But okay. There are definitely a few actors that have sued Disney during the home video era because they did not get residuals from home video. But they kind of got in trouble because the actor that originally played King Louis, was being mimicked in this show because they wanted them to sound like the original characters, because this is based on the Jungle Book, basically. And so eventually they got away from that. But little drama with the show. But this one was interesting because this is also, the funny thing is, when this episode was, a lot of the pilot episodes for Ducktales, Rescue Rangers, and all that were placed deep into the show run once the episodes started running. So they would cut them up, make them episodes, and show them like in season 2 for some reason. It was kind of odd. But this one, of course, is called Plunder and Lightning Part 2. Very, very simple. But, when Baloo can't pay off his mortgage, a perky young businesswoman named Rebecca Cunningham buys the tiny cargo company and brings her little daughter in tow.
She changes the name, which pisses him off, too.
Right?
So.
Higher and Higher or something like that? Higher for Hire.
Higher for Hire,
which could be taken any which way. If you're a stoner, you're going to be cracking up at that joke.
Dude, I want to fly with that plane.
Right? I'm getting higher and higher right now. On life.
Yeah.
But no, it was a good episode. The show really kind of started off strong, taught you about, paying your bills on time, because otherwise people are going to buy your plane and then hire you out as hired help.
Yeah, you lose all ownership, and you're now working for the man.
Right? Which kind of brings me to the villain, who is Shere Khan in this, which is, of course, was the tiger from the first Jungle Book movie.
Correct.
But in this one, he's a corporate raider. Like, he's a master businessman, and
absolutely.
he is evil and a little scary.
Very scary and intimidating.
Yes.
Like every time that he's at that desk or he's standing at his window throughout the series, when people come to approach him, they're always shivering. Like even people
terrified.
people that worked with him.
Right.
They're still like, oh my God, they're scared to say anything negative. Like, they have to give him good news, because he's just that, and his expression and his deep voice just never change.
And I'm going to say this: I like him better in the cartoon show than George Sanders in the original film. I liked George Sanders. But this actor actually brings a little more gravitas and terror to it.
Oh, yeah.
And, it was really interesting, but he was very dark, but very much like a businessman, a millionaire. We call him a billionaire today. And the reason he gets involved even with this whole business of Baloo and Higher, is because Kit in the first episode, I think, steals from the air pirates
that ruby or whatever.
Yeah, a ruby, a stone, a red stone. They think is worth a lot of money, and that actually belongs to Shere Khan. And he uses the air pirates. They have to come and tell him, like, oh my goodness, we lost the jewel. And Khan, of course, is terrifying, and he's like, get my jewel back.
Yeah.
And this starts the whole arc of the show. But I thought he was executed extremely well. And again, it's a show of the late 80s, early 90s, so of course you're going to have those Gordon Gekko influences. But it's funny how Lex Luthor in the cartoon show, the 88 cartoon show from Ruby Spears, kind of did the same thing. They turned him into this corporate kind of evil villain that we've identified today with companies like Amazon and Facebook, all that fun stuff. And
Bezos Khan.
Yep, exactly. And, it's kind of interesting how that started taking shape, and it really influenced the media, because this happened in the comics before the shows. They were writing Lex Luthor as this evil billionaire, like years before any of the shows picked up on it. And, but it's funny how even in cartoon shows, they were written as evil. Like, these guys that wrote these cartoon shows that we grew up with, they were kind of like leftist hippies. They wrote these villainous characters as just crazy, mad businessmen. And, it's funny how much more terrifying now that we're adults. We're like, oh yeah, that is much more intimidating than just like some crazy scientist.
And you know what's crazy? One more thing about Khan is, like, he used to do this thing too when you'd piss him off and he's sitting at his table and he'd start to do the whole fingers on the table, but then he'd pull out his claws.
Yep.
And the thing was, that was kind of like intimidating for me as a kid looking at that. And then Disney later on made comic series of this show and others.
Yep.
And they didn't go to the links of Marvel or DC as far as, violence and stuff like that. But there was a couple that I seen with Shere Khan in the Tailspin comics where he grabs one of the rhino guys. And remember how stoic they were?
Yeah.
And how they didn't have any kind of expression and they were buff. He threw one through a window.
Yeah.
So like there was certain things like that where they can get away with it in the comics but not be too extreme. But just that just added a layer if you were a fan of the series, watching or reading the comics and then looking at the show, and you're like, he's capable of doing a lot more. You know?
He's very psychotically a businessman. And in this episode, what adds danger is that the little girl, Rebecca's daughter, sneaks onto the Molly, sneaks onto the plane, sneaks onto the Sea Duck, and this is at the point where they don't know Baloo, Kit, and Baloo and Kit don't know that Shere Khan is sending the pirates to come get that jewel that he stole. So, that kid, both the kids are in danger. God, it's like Baloo's like Batman. He just puts kids in danger all the time. But want to be my sidekick?
Yeah, how old
it doesn't matter if you can spell. Sorry.
How old are you? 13? I too old. 10.
10.
You come with me.
You got trauma? I can fix that. Well, not fix it, but, we'll do some stuff.
You got daddy issues, right?
It's fun, right? Here, put this costume. How do you like domino masks? And killing. But no, this is funny. And then after, of course, the danger starts, we cut off, to be continued. We'll see what happens to them in the next episode. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was actually pretty good. I like the way they set up Shere Khan. It just makes him a very good, they did good villains. And that's, I think, the key that they understood. These creators of these shows must have been huge Batman fans and comic book fans, because these characters all had pretty solid rogues galleries, which made the heroes all that much better in these shows and a lot more fun. But next we're going to go to Darkwing Duck, the only show of the Disney block that was an original creation and that did their pilot in 2 episodes that were actually just episodes and not like a full arc mini movie. Mm-hmm. So the second one is called, Darkly Dawns the Duck Part 2. Simple enough. And of course, this is where Darkwing, tries to protect Gozlyn from Taurus Bulba. But she gets kidnapped eventually anyway because they're looking for this invention that her grandfather developed. Mm-hmm. Of course, upon his passing, she's in an orphanage. And what kind of comes to pass in this episode that I thought was kind of touching beyond just the major plot was the fact that, Darkwing is, he sees himself as this lone ranger. I don't need any baggage. And, he doesn't want the kid, basically, and she's looking for something to love her, and she really clings to him, and he's like, no, I work alone, and just try to be uber serious, and and then once he gets annoyed, when she's just acting like a kid, he's like, well, I want to hurry up and get this case over with, so you can go back to where you got to go back to, and we can both get on with our lives. And then of course she gets kidnapped. And he's like, oh no, gotta save her. Saves her, and ends up finding the fact, realizing that she gives his life purpose. And a lot of these shows are about these kids. Even because when you look at Tailspin, Kit, Cloud Kicker, Huey, Dewy and Louis for Scrooge, Gozlyn for Darkwing, they all give the main characters purpose. All these kids are giving purpose to these adult characters, and giving them something to love and drive and protect. And that was a funny, interesting theme in all the shows that I never really realized until
later on.
Watching them back to back to back.
Yeah, you kind of get that feel. I mean, not really on a Chippendale, but on everything else, it's there because, she literally is a redheaded stepchild.
Right. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so right. She's got the freckles and everything, dude.
That's right.
So yeah, but she's like that smart, sassy kind of street, wise kid, but, went through the system and... Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's got to be, he's got to save her, and the two will make a nice little combination later of, father-daughter type, and I think there was a lot of those undertones, like we talked in the last episode, of, blended families, of a kid that's had a rough upbringing, kind of like tired of the streets, but can still live on the streets, but then finds a nice home. And there's that conflict, and then all those situations come up to where, the kid gets comfortable, but then the father or the parent is not really feeling it, and then right when they start to feel good, the kid starts to say, well, I miss my old life because maybe someone else comes back. And
right.
So there's that, but Disney,
it's a roller coaster.
Yeah, Disney was trying to like play with your feels.
Yeah, definitely. And the blended families, it really was. Mm-hmm. And blended families, blended wealthy families.
Correct.
This was very much a Little Orphan Annie kind of a theme that went on with
or
a lot
Webster.
Or Webster, went on with the Disney block shows. But what's interesting about this episode, the second episode of this Darkwing Duck pilot, is that it introduces, doesn't introduce, but it accentuates the fact that Launchpad McQuack is a huge Darkwing fan.
Yes.
Like a huge, comic book nerd kind of a thing. And to the point where he has his plane built like Darkwing Duck. It's Darkwing Duck's plane. He's like, I've been working on it for a year because Darkwing's like, I need somebody to help me. I got to get to Gozlyn. Then Launchpad's like, I got just the thing. And, he flies in his plane, which is shaped like the emblem of Darkwing Duck. And it looks like just like Darkwing's face. It's like the X-Jet.
Yeah.
And then he saves him. He's like, I told you I was a big fan. I was working on this for a year. And then they get to save Gozlyn. But as they save her, it's interesting because they fly in and blow a hole in the villain's ship, which is shaped like a big bull, matching him. And as they blow a hole in the ship, Darkwing is released in his motorcycle from, like his bat cycle, from the plane, and, gets to drive in this big dramatic way and say, I am the terror that flaps in the night. Yeah, I am the fruit fly in your ointment,
Yeah, it always changed.
Always
That's
was always
love.
Something else. Yeah, it was something so convoluted sometimes.
Yeah.
You're just like, geez.
It's either off the wall or it kind of matched the villain that he was fighting. So
Right.
And it was pretty crazy though, that whole like the Darkwing wing or whatever it was called, and then there's like his primary like his Batmobile was the motorcycle.
It was a bat cycle.
Yeah, it was
he
pretty
didn't
much.
He didn't have a car, right?
No,
it was
he
just
didn't
a
have
bat
a car.
cycle
It
and
was
the sidecar.
Yeah, and again, like we talked about last episode too, it's like Launchpad at this point is pretty well known. He's his sidekick, doesn't mask up, doesn't do nothing.
No,
and he's just rolling with him, and everyone's like, "All right, who the hell's Darkwing?"
Yeah, I know. Well, let me see. He's got his sidekick there, and then this Drake Mallard guy's got the same sidekick. I don't know. It's like a Clark Kent thing. Like, they just don't see it because they don't want to see it. They're like, nah.
And didn't we see him on the news crashing in Duckburg with Ducktales?
I know, that guy's busy.
He's all over the place.
He's got doppelgangers everywhere.
Yeah.
But no, this was funny. This was a good show, and it ended well too, because once I think. Let me see. The bull, Taurus Bulba, when he orders Gozlyn to basically be killed, to be, fall to her death, because he's got this vulture that's like his sidekick, and that does his bidding. And when she's being held hostage in midair, and the deal is made with Darkwing to give up, and the girl will be released, and Taurus Bulba gives the signal, and then the vulture drops Gozlyn into the, it's San Francisco Bay, basically.
Yeah.
And Darkwing kicks him good and knocks him out. Like, he hits him pretty severely. And then, of course, they have a Back to the Future 2 moment where Launchpad, carries her, catches her, of course, on the plane. And then, they show her coming up on top of the hood, which was kind of cool. I don't know if they did that on purpose, but that was very close to when Back to the Future 2 came out. It was like a year or two before.
Yeah, around that same time.
Yeah, and then they end up being this, again, happy blended family. And that's the end of the Darkwing Duck pilot, Darkly Dawns the Duck, parts 1 and 2. And that was fun. I liked it. Again, I have a soft spot for that show, and you know me.
Yeah. It's a parody, but it's still really, really good.
Has a lot of heart, and it kept alive the characters from Ducktales. So it was a sequel show without being a sequel show.
It was it was a true what's that called?
Transitional show.
Yeah, or Spinoff. Yeah, it was a true spinoff.
Exactly. And again, because you also had Gizmo Duck in there from that show. So it carried over, and it gave the show and the characters a few more years of life, which was nice. And it still kind of opened the world to its own kind of interpretation of something else as well. So it wasn't just a spinoff, but it was a unique spinoff that was its own thing, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But now we're going to head to Saturday Morning Mecca, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Something we always bonded over. And now we're hitting episode 2 of the 5-part pilot. And this one's called Enter the Shredder.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is where the Turtles actually discover the Technodrome.
Yes.
And meet Shredder for the first time.
Yeah, what I love about this one is when, skipping ahead a little bit, when Shredder actually meets them with all his CCTV.
The big brother watching everywhere.
He's like, I can show you where you were first created. It's because of me.
Right.
Be on my team.
That's right.
But he had, I just, again, like last episode, how the hell do you get that many cameras down in the sewer? He's got them everywhere, bro. I'm pretty sure he has them in April's bathroom. It's pretty
Poor
bad.
April. She's called a bimbo in this episode, too.
Oh, yeah.
There's such sexism in this show right now. Like, gosh, it kind of makes me wonder about the real Ghostbusters with Janine. I'm like, were they sexist with her in that show, too? Probably.
Yeah.
We're going to review that at some point.
We'll check it out.
But no, for this one, definitely, she's called a bimbo, and she's just like, oh, well. It's like Rocksteady or Bebop, right? One of them say, watch it, Or,
yeah, I think it's Rocksteady. Yeah.
Yeah, that's we were watching that just like shaking our heads. Like,
yeah, because we see the last of the Bebop and Rocksteady human form in this one.
Because they're transformed. Because
we needed new toys for Playmates, as we stated in the last episode too.
Yep.
So they, we have those, I forget what they're called, those characters that are on like wheels. It kind of reminds me of Gizmo Duck, because remember
the transforming toys.
Yeah, he was on the one wheel. Those went up there, wrestled down some animals, and they used the mutagen in another way. So they showed you another way they can mutate, and Shredder used that on the
Bebop and Rocksteady.
Bebop and Rocksteady. Yeah. Those two other characters, the other Mohawk guy and the other guy.
Well, let's set this up. There was a gang of 4.
Yeah,
right?
Gang of 4,
like punk rockers.
Mm-hmm, pretty much.
And they were volunteering for this whole experiment. Mm-hmm. But only Bebop and Rocksteady were chosen. And one of them, was it Bebop or Rocksteady that was black? It was a black character.
Yeah, Rocksteady was black.
Yeah, Rocksteady was a black character, a black punk rocker, which was kind of forward-thinking for the time.
Yeah, it was.
Looking back, there weren't a lot of black characters in superhero cartoons. Mm-hmm. He was a villain in this, but he was a black punk rocker. That was pretty unique. And I just looked at him. I looked at it, and I'm like, oh my God, because I barely remember certain episodes, but I didn't remember that they were human at one point, and also one of them was black. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, no, go ahead. And then
I was going to say, like the group of 4, you had the Mohawk guy, and then you had, I guess, Bebop was sort of like, I would say maybe just a buff old football player, like out of high school, but he's just big. And then Rocksteady was sort of like your skinnier, like you said, punk rocker. And then they had another guy that was interesting. He never really said anything in the first 2 episodes, but he had the flock of seagulls hair.
Right.
And that guy disappears too. Those 2 guys are just never ever seen before after that. And I think Shredder in this one was like, okay, if you got your 4 mutants, I got my 2. And these guys are real buff. They should do the dirty work, you know. And
they combined them with a warthog, I think it was,
and a rhino.
And a rhino.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, on the little machines that would gather them. Those were the were those the Baxter Stockman robots?
Those are before Baxter Stockman.
So those were before Baxter.
Yeah, so that's more like Krang's type of technology.
Who was also introduced in this, or yes. he was consulted in this. Was he in the first episode?
Yes, he was in the.
Okay.
Well, actually, no, he wasn't in the first episode, but he this one he was shown for the first time, and he doesn't have his outfit yet.
Right.
And he's doing those gurgly noises, which was cringe, dude.
That was
those got phased out later, but he's all.
It's like he had indigestion.
Yeah, and you heard like gurgling or fart noises, and you're like, oh, that's not sexy at all.
That's
dude.
a different kind of brain fart. That's really weird.
Hey, good point.
We found the origin of brain fart, folks.
There he goes, Krang.
It's millennials. We did that too. You're welcome.
Yeah.
No, but the interesting thing too I noticed about this show, and now there's something called black coding in cartoons. It's not new, but it's where cartoon characters are black by either culture or stereotype or whatever it might be, but they're not outwardly black characters. Like in Doug, character might be green, but he's the black best friend, or whatever. And I always wondered if the Turtles were, because we saw them in this episode, like when they come up from the sewers and they have to go find April at Channel 6 News. They have to dress up like street kids, street teens, and they're real cool with a boom box, and they got all the moves. And I'm like, are they black?
Yeah,
are the Ninja Turtles black?
They I don't know. All throughout this series, it seems like as the show or the plot gave way or needed them to be a certain way, they were a certain way. Like they were in this episode, like to your point, they were very urban,
right?
Very urban, and they even had mannerisms of black kids. And then there's other episodes where, like when I used to watch it with my friends, a few of them would say, if we had to pick an ethnicity for each turtle, like, and let's see if you agree with this, but the consensus when we talked about it was Leonardo was obviously an Asian.
Okay.
And then they said
Donatello's black.
Donatello's black.
Yeah.
Raphael is more of like your
hot-headed Irish.
Yeah, and Michelangelo's obviously white.
You're right. He's just plain.
So that's how like they said there could be some mixture in Raph, but for the most part, Donatello seemed to be the black guy. Asian was Leo, and so on and so on. So
interesting.
Yeah, but there is times in this series where they'll take on a persona of whatever the plot tells it to be, which is weird.
And I don't want to be like stereotypical about it, like, oh, they can dance, they must be black characters, because obviously white characters would never be able to dance like that.
Yeah.
We're not saying that necessarily, but throughout like different iterations of the Ninja Turtles, you've had black actors or take on the voice roles, or they've been kind of into what's hip or what's cool. And let's face it, cool culture, hip culture it's always appropriated from black culture
for the most part, or at least in the 80s and 90s for sure, and
usually
early 2000s.
In all of America. I mean, we wouldn't have any culture if it wasn't for black culture. So that's why I'm like, are they black? But especially in the Michael Bay films, I think that they strike me as like they were characterized as being black teens.
Yeah,
because they were cool.
Exactly. And this one, I mean, they went blatant, dude. I mean, Roth's got like the shades. He's got the stereo on his prototypical 80s on his shoulder.
Yep.
And then you got Mike with his, Michelangelo was acting, like just not non-Michelangelo.
Yeah, they weren't. Yeah, all of a sudden they had different kind of characteristics and idiosyncrasies.
Yeah, their sweaters or whatever. Like it was very urban, dude. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I see what they're trying to pass off on here, but still.
And I kind of watched. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'm like, I'm gonna watch this show with a new pair of eyes now. Like if they're black coding, I don't mind that at all. Because there wasn't a lot of black heroes on in kids shows. That's why I think Static Shock was such an important show too. For black kids. And just for everybody, but specifically for black kids because it was for them.
It's just certain stuff you see later on. You're like, whoa, okay,
right,
yeah.
No, it's interesting, and this episode has a lot, and I think the animation was also better. We talked about that too. The animation was definitely better in this one. It was very clunky in the first one, and I'm not saying it doesn't have its hits and misses in this one, but for the most part, it was more fluid. They seem to be more on model than not.
The fight scenes were good. The robots that they faced were good. Mm-hmm. Like you said, when we were watching Bebop and Rocksteady, were more defined.
Yep.
The Technodrome looked really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the plot was very I was like, man, back in the day, I was like, this is a pretty cool show. But when Shredder's like, come on in, they're like, okay,
he's just gonna run into a
trap. Gotta be a trap.
Okay,
whatever.
I hate when he says that and they run in, and
automatically it's a trap.
And Splinter's supposed to be this master who taught them all that they know about martial arts, and he gets caught so easy. I'm like, bro,
dude. And then the thing I couldn't get over when we were rewatching it is he's crying. I'm like, I don't remember him crying.
How tight is that rope?
he's literally shedding a tear of like, what the heck?
I'm not crying. You're crying.
It's the sushi I ate earlier.
Oh, that's another interesting thing too. They kind of make fun of sushi being unappetizing.
Yes.
And in 87, 88 when this show came out, or 87, I didn't realize that sushi. I thought by then it was still like a kind of a high-end thing. I didn't know why they were kind of making fun of it. Now I'm like, oh, sushi, that's great. Why doesn't April want sushi? Why is she turning her nose up at that like it's gross?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'll put it to you this way, bro. That's the main reason, and this is a true story, dude. Until I was in my 20s, I never had sushi.
Really?
Yeah, I was late 20s before I first tried sushi.
Oh, wow.
And it was because the Ninja Turtles would always harp on how bad sushi was.
And did you wait till you got to a gas station? You're like, today's the day.
No, it was someone I was dating. She was like, you got to try sushi. And I'm like, isn't that expensive? She said, not as expensive as you think it is. And we went out to eat, and I'm like, oh, dude, I don't know if I'm going to eat all that. All it took was me tasting was a spicy tuna. It was warm, the warm kind of sushi first.
Yeah.
Because I was really not really feeling the raw, and I tried to do that one, and I was like, oh, this is really good,
right?
And then I started dabbling with all the other pieces, but yeah, I didn't eat sushi because of Ninja Turtles.
Wow. Jeez. And we also probably tried a bunch of gross pizza toppings because of Ninja Turtles as well. Because they always had the weirdest, most unappetizing combinations. I think in the second episode, they're putting cereal on their pizza.
Cornflakes.
And I'm telling you, how bad must their cholesterol have been?
Oh, I don't know.
All they did was eat pizza all the time. I mean, can you imagine Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in their 30s and 40s just having to go to a cardiologist, doing the stress test on the treadmill and just passing out dead?
Did you know there was a Sports Center show in the late 90s that was named after the Ninja Turtles because they tried a morning show, like a morning Sports Center, and they called it Cold Pizza.
Oh, no way.
And the inspiration from one of the producers came from Ninja Turtles.
Really?
Yeah.
It's funny how those shows influence us later on.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. But yeah, this episode ends with how does this episode end?
Oh, basically, they beat up and destroy
Bebop,
Shredder's, robots.
Right.
Bebop and Rocksteady get their butts kicked. So does the Foot Clan.
That's right.
Because they offered them an opportunity to join the Foot Clan. They're all, why should we? And they don't.
You're crazy, dude.
Yeah, they get Splinter. They split out of there, and then they have Bebop and Rocksteady chase them to the surface. They get locked up, but then they get freed later. But the turtles, go back to the sewer and everyone.
Yeah, the little robots that Shredder has working for him get them, and like, Shredder wants to have a word with you, and like, can you put us back in the cage? And they, rope him and take him down into the ground, leaving this huge gaping hole. And the Technodrome is like huge. What was the reference they gave?
It was supposedly the size of Shea Stadium, which is Mets Stadium back in the 90s. So that's fairly big.
Right.
And the way it's drawn, it is pretty big. It's supposed, and then you were even talking about it kind of looks like something out of Star Wars.
Right. It's like a mini Death Star.
Yeah.
And it's roaming around under New York City.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny. It's like, you don't think people would, notice that?
Feel it? The earthquakes, anything.
It's massive.
And then when it does surface later in the show, like it's huge. It's like skyscrapers big, and it's rolling, just destroying buildings at ease, and taking out blocks.
Right.
So yeah, I mean it's quite the weapon.
Right. It's amazing, but it gets away. The turtles rescue Splinter. They get free, and Shredder reveals that he's the one that created the turtles with the ooze that he created as well. So he created the mutagen that transforms them, and that he created Bebop and Rocksteady with. And he combined them with those animals using the mutagen, which they don't show because it's probably an ugly process.
Yeah, probably.
But, it's revealed, and Shredder reveals it to the Ninja Turtles and Splinter that it was him. He did it. And, he was also, of course, we learned in the first episode that he is Splinter's rival that had Splinter thrown out of his dojo back in Japan. And so he's like, I'm the reason you even exist. I'm the reason that Splinter even came here. You have me to thank for all that. James Avery, having a great time doing that voice. Uncle Phil. But yeah, we learned a lot in this episode. There's a lot packed into those 22 minutes.
Yeah, and it sets it up beautifully for the next few episodes, because the next ones are going to be really in tune with Shredder's now ongoing rivalry with the Turtles.
Interesting, but to be continued.
Yes.
And now we are running home after school to Batman the Animated Series. And of course, the episode we're going to talk about today is Heart of Ice. And, it's funny. This show started off really strong. The episodes are just masterpieces, but this one in particular won an Emmy for Best Children's Show.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was written by Paul Dini. It's like his, his pièce de résistance. It's his big moment in the show. And he had a few of them, but this one was actually a terrific episode that did a lot for Mr. Freeze, who was kind of a joke character before this. And, in the comics, they actually killed him off in, I think it was Robin 2 in like 91. So like a year or so before this episode even came out, Mr. Freeze was dead in the comics because they thought, everybody at DC thought of him as a joke. He was created, let me see, I think in the 50s. And he was never taken seriously. He didn't have like the gravitas of Two-Face or the Joker or anything like this. But his origin, Victor Freeze loses his wife Nora in a horrible accident caused by bureaucrats, or at least company men, exactly. And that's the interesting thing too. In this one, we were talking about it when we were screening it. The character that Mark Hamill plays in this. He's very much like a corporate climber, just a slime ball, and doesn't care about anybody but himself and money. And he's the one that actually causes Mr. Freeze's accident when he walks in on him, as Batman discovers later on, that, he walks in on Victor Freeze as he's recording, like a video diary about his experiments to save his wife using cryogenics. And, this guy comes in and Ferris Boyle, and like literally says, this project is shut down, this is my equipment, you cost me $3 million so far, I can do whatever I want with it. And then, he tells the security guard he brings with him, like, get her out of there, like bring her out of the deep freeze. And, Victor Freeze is like, no, she'll die. You can't stop the process mid-process. And he's like, I don't care, blah, blah, blah. It's not my problem. And so then Victor Freeze sees the gun on the security guard, grabs the gun and points it at this guy, at Ferris. And, Ferris just says, hey, well, let's work this out, man. Come on, be cool. He didn't say be cool, but it's basically him saying, come on, we'll talk this out. And then when Victor lowers the gun because he's not a murderer, he pushes him into a vat of chemicals, like a table full of and it just explodes all around. He's like, oh, and then, it creates Mr. Freeze. And then Mr. Freeze, of course, in this episode comes back, seeks revenge, and Batman gets involved, but learns to have a certain amount of empathy. And it was such a great take on the character that they brought him back to life in the comics and gave him this as his origin. And that doesn't always happen. Like, shows don't always create strong enough characters that they start to be incorporated into the comic books because they're so good. But they did that in this episode, and they also created Harley Quinn in a few episodes from this one. And that she was also incorporated in the comics and became a very big hit ever since. But they did a lot in this show to kind of really add to the comic origins of a lot of these characters, and Mr. Freeze specifically, because if you look back to the 60s character in the Batman show, he was a fun character, but he was also just a jokey character.
Laughingstock.
Yep, and he was portrayed by 3 very serious actors, Eli Wallach, Otto Preminger, and George Sanders. And each one of them played him. And for various reasons, they didn't work out. But they were either Oscar-nominated actors or actual Oscar award winners. And that was the most serious part of Mr. Freeze's history up until this show.
Yeah, in this episode, and getting back to, you said the $3 million, Victor never said how he was going to pay him back and why he took 2 extra months. Because remember, he's like, I've been paying, this should have been shut down a couple months ago. Right. So it's like, wait. So Victor was scamming the guy, but still the corporate,
save his wife.
Yeah, but the corporate guy still is wrong too. So you wind up leaning towards Victor too, and it is tragic. And like you said when we were watching the show, when Batman's watching the video, he's like, oh my God. It's like they couldn't say that, to your point.
They couldn't say, oh my God, because they couldn't have anything that had anything to do with religion because they didn't want to offend anyone. But the creators of the show said that they were shocked that they got away with him being able to say, oh my God.
But see, that made it so real.
Yeah.
Like this story in itself, the making Freeze stoic and just the heartless dude, because obviously he's frozen in ice.
Right.
So, and then the characters that were his cronies, they character builded with that, where he just has no empathy for someone that, even though he shot him, he shouldn't have been in the way. Like, no matter what, he's wrong. And then Batman has to show the moral compass to save that individual. Yeah. And then
because he empathizes. He empathizes with Ferris because he talks to Ferris. He goes and talks to him as Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, he tells him how sorry he was to see that. And then you said, to your point, you were like, hey, there's the part where Victor Freeze is like, hey, like, I respect Batman. I don't want you to be a part of this. Don't be my enemy.
Yeah.
I already got enough enemies. And there's some good, really, really good character building and story building. Even Alfred, like when Bruce is sick and sneezing, he's like, he's amazed by what kind of technology he has. He offers him some chicken noodle soup,
right?
And then he
plays with him. He kind of teases him a little bit, like family.
And it's really, really cool. Like, so in this episode, I could see why it was nominated or won the award, because it's like you just see a ton of character building, like a lot of like realness to the storyline, a lot of good background drawing, a lot of characters. Like Summer Gleason played a good part in this.
She was great. Yeah, she's always the news reporter in all the episodes. Yeah, she's the main news reporter for Gotham.
The police officer getting for shooing away the kids from the crime scene because they're playing with the snow. At the end of her telecast, he's getting nailed in the back with snowballs.
There's so many great human touches in this show.
Yes,
like just the little things really bring out like those human touches that really make it memorable and funny. And it doesn't always have to be Batman or the main villain. Just these little side characters. I was going to say nothing characters, but these NPCs basically, are just so, they make it so much more rich and fulfilling in that show. But this episode was just, it's so good on so many levels, because Batman, like the reason I brought that up about Batman's empathy and empathizing with Freeze is because you brought something up. We were joking about how Freeze just keeps letting Batman live when we're like, just ice him, do it, kill him, and your problems are over. But it kind of made me think, and you asking the question is what made me think, like, well, yeah, why doesn't he kill him? And at the beginning he goes, this is not your fight, Batman. He says it's not your fight, and he's not saying like you're my enemy, but it's again, but you've made yourself an enemy of mine, or if you're not with me, you're against me. So then he has to kind of go against Batman. But he knows Batman is a force for good, but he's got something he's got to do.
Yeah.
So that's why he
true.
lets him live a few times. He doesn't want to kill Batman. He doesn't, because he knows Batman is a force for good, which kind of gives that character so much more depth. Like, because he could have just iced him and killed him easy.
Oh yeah, a
couple times.
He had him hanging up there. Yeah. He put up a wall to kind of enclose him.
Yeah, he's like telling him, like, leave me alone, let me do this. And at the end, when he actually gets his revenge on Ferris, he means to kill him, but Batman stops him, of course. And he uses the chicken soup because he's, Mr. Freeze is, that suit that he has to insulate him because of the accident. He can't live outside sub-zero temperatures. It also gives him like 3 times his normal strength. So it makes him a lot stronger, completely insulated from the outside world. And then Bruce, of course, uses the chicken soup that Alfred gave him that he keeps on his utility belt, bat soup, and he just smashes it against the glass
right next to the shark repellent.
right there. But it's kind of interesting. It's a very interesting how everything is connected in that episode. But he does that. And then, of course, Freeze, his glass dome that he can see through that protects his head, cracks open because of the differential in cold and hot, and just cracks open, and he loses a lot of the strength, and he's done for. But before that, he did freeze this guy from the the waist down or the feet up to the waist, and he just wanted to see the fear in his eyes for trying to kill his wife and almost killing him, and he was about to just see the fear in his eyes and then freeze him the rest of the way and kill him dead.
Waste him, yeah.
Yeah, waste him, but Batman interfered. But Batman, the funny thing is, Batman goes up to him after that, and, he just doesn't help him. He helps at the beginning. Batman helps a henchman of Freeze's who got in the way and gets his legs frozen. Yeah. And Batman has to let Freeze go in order to save this guy, take him back to the Batcave, and unfreeze his legs in this big bath that looks like something from, and really, the visuals kind of make me feel like it's from Star Wars. Yeah. Because, Batman gets frozen upside down on the ceiling from the legs, just like Luke was. And, same thing about the bath, where, he survives and is healed through the bath. Batman does that for this guy's legs. So those had to have been subconscious or very conscious nods to Star Wars. But, it showed Batman had empathy for these henchmen. And this henchman was begging for his life, so, Batman saved him. But at the end, when it came to this character, when it came to Ferris Boyle, he just leaves him frozen. He doesn't take him back to the Batcave. He's like, have a good one, buddy, and walks off. He basically, the guy can die, but he knew he was a villain, and he created Mr. Freeze, and, he essentially let the wife die, because we don't know if she's dead or not by the end of the episode, how the experiment went. When they talk about it in further episodes, we know more. But it's kind of fascinating how they built that. So we're like, well, Batman will save a henchman, but when it comes to a corporate villain, he'll just let him die. If nature takes its course, oh well.
Yeah, because like you said, the ice was higher on this guy. It's at least to his belly button on that.
He would have died of hypothermia soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, he took that route, and Batman, like, again, like, we'll find out, like you said, later on what happens to Victor's wife. But that scene at the end, which we'll see several times later in the series, where either they're in Arkham at some point, or he's breaking out of Arkham, or something to do with Arkham, and one of the other characters walks by his cell. It's always a light dusting of snow. It's frozen. It's like he's got his own like little freezer type area
to keep him alive.
Yeah, and for him to be reflecting, looking at a little what is it called, the snow globe of his wife. Yeah. And how he talks about failing her. I mean, it's pretty rough.
Yeah, it's a heart gripping episode. Heart wrenching. It's a good one
because it is one of those ones where it's like, okay, you want to be Team Batman,
but you root for the villain, man. You root for Freeze, like I do. Especially now as an adult, I'm like, yeah, man, you kill that guy. You freeze him to death.
Yeah, he screwed over your wife. Get your wife back, or see if you can. Steal his money, get his family too.
Yeah, I know. Get them kids. That's horrible, right? But get them kids. But and you, as an adult, as a man, you're just like, oh yeah, yeah. And the fact that Batman was just like, look, man, I can't let you kill him, but I get it, I understand. And at the end, when he turns, as this guy's frozen, Ferris Boyle's frozen from the waist down, and shivering and all that, Batman, it's one of those moments where he's like, I don't gotta kill you. but I'm gonna save you either. And just kind
Yeah,
of walks off.
She's like, you're on your own, buddy.
Yep. And like I said before, we don't know. We assumed that Nora did die in that accident, as far as I remember. We don't know if she's still alive somehow. So essentially, she's dead, and they decided later on to kind of like keep her alive to keep Victor's motivation going,
his arc going.
Yeah, which was interesting in future episodes.
Because you don't
as well.
see Ferris anymore after this.
No, he's see, that's some of the villains that are the villains of the villains,
They're
which are
one-offs.
very interesting. Yeah, just like Edward Nygma, his villain in If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Rich? I think it was that one. And yeah, that guy. But when we get to that episode, that's one of my favorites as well.
It's really good.
But no, this one was great for a lot of reasons. And this was directed by Bruce Timm, and not because he was trying to be like, I want to direct this one. He said they were so far behind in production that they needed a director, so he's like, I'll step in and do it. So he did it. He got a team together as quickly as he could. He had them storyboard it and do it as fast as possible. And he said it was really good. His team did a great job. He just got whoever wasn't working at the time, pulled them together. They did their whole thing. He said, I didn't really have to change much. And the episode was ready to go overseas. And this character was created in 1959. It was February 1959. And, he was called Mr. Freeze, I think, in like March of 68. They kind of changed it because originally his name was something else. But he was so popular, because, like I said before, he was so popular in the Batman animated series that they brought him back for future episodes, brought him back to life in the comics. And the Arkham games, they use his story arc. And I don't know if they used tapes from Michael Ansara, who did the voice, who, was married. He was an actor in his own right. He was great, but he was also married to Barbara Eden, who was Jeannie from I Dream of Jeannie.
Oh,
that was her husband for years. And he's an interesting actor to watch. But in this show, when they were doing the voice recording for him, they kept telling him, you need to be more monotone. He's like, but it sounds weird. And they're like, we know, just monotone, just no life to it. And they kind of had to coax him into, the tone that he finally came out with, which is very metallic, and it's very just cold. Let's just call it what it is. But it's iconic. Like, this guy was amazing. And, and once he got it, it was really amazing.
Yeah, most of the villains on this show, as we'll move on and get to each one of them, they do have great voice actors that just give the character itself, which is already a majestic-looking character, another feel. And he had that robotic, like,
suit,
and but the voice was a little robotic, but it was also hurt at the same time.
Yeah, there was a pain.
Yeah, and it just it brought it out so well. In any episode that he was in. No,
it's true. And they said that the reason he felt that he could murder was because he felt that he was dead inside.
Correct.
That the accident had killed him.
He was a shell.
Emotionally. He wasn't a human being anymore. And he didn't feel that way. But little trivia. Who do you think their first choice was to play Mr. Freeze?
I couldn't tell you.
He was a big actor in the 90s. He was going through his, let's just say, fava beans. See if that reminds
you. Silence of the Lambs.
Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins?
And you know what? Like, look, that would have been awesome. How creepy that would have been. Michael Ansara is irreplaceable. He was our Mr. Freeze. But can you imagine Anthony Hopkins? Come on, Batman. And
I'm hungry.
Their second option was a little more obscure, but it would have been an interesting choice. But Anthony Zerbe. I don't know if you remember, he was in the Matrix sequels. He was like the president of their colony.
Okay.
And he was also in The Omega Man with Charlton Heston. He was one of the lead zombie in the 70s. He did a lot of work, great actor, but he was their second choice. But finally they got Michael Ansara. And, once they worked with him, man, he's iconic. What a great characterization. And the look was so, like you were talking about earlier, the look was so interesting because it was actually, he was actually designed by Mike Mignola, who did Hellboy. He designed Mr. Freeze. So that's why it has that kind of, Hellboy world kind of a look. And Bruce Timm originally wanted the dome just to be a white line, so you understand there's glass there. But the studio he sent it to did the shading to where it gave it, you didn't have to do a line, but it had this like gradation to where you can tell it's glass that way, which is just kind of really effective.
Yeah, it is really effective, and you kind of couldn't go wrong with them eyes too. The deep red eyes, so
especially in the dark, like some of the title cards when it's just like the eyes. Yeah, that's very creepy.
Yeah, I mean, and that'll go a long way as the series goes, because I think that they perfected it the more they featured Victor Fries.
And especially when he would step, the weight of his suit after a while was emphasized as well. And you realize just how heavy that thing was.
And this obviously came before Batman 3 or Batman Forever, right?
No, Batman 4.
Batman 4. Yeah, this came before. And it's so hard to believe that the cartoon could nail it to what Mr. Freeze should be.
So much better.
Compared to puns upon puns upon puns that weren't fun.
Batman, what happened to the dinosaurs? The Ice Age! What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
It's time to freeze. like
freeze.
Like all that, them on skates, the whole nine.
That was even Chris O'Donnell said that felt more like a toy commercial. It's like the third one, Batman Forever, we did felt like a Batman movie. Batman and Robin, he goes, it felt like I was just shooting it for the toys. And it was bad.
It was very terrible. My point being is like, how can you nail it with the animated series on how to do Victor Fries in general, and then come back with that version of Arnold just so far off.
Yeah.
Because even like if you want to take away all the stupidness and all the campiness, his overall, like, his look and everything, just, it didn't make sense.
No, I know the guy that built that suit too.
Really?
Yeah, drag and drawn it. Yeah, it's amazing how well it was done. Like I said, with such empathy and such depth, and that was the beauty of this show. Batman, of course, had his depth, but the thing is, a main character can't carry a series on their own. And the old saying is always true: the greater the villain, the greater the hero. And that's why Kevin Conroy's Batman was so good. And I know Kevin Conroy gets a lot of praise, and he deserves it. He was an amazing Batman for generations of kids. But what made him better was the fact that he was surrounded by such talented actors around him. Because remember, before this, he was kind of a character actor, a TV actor, kind of. Like, he never had a big break. This was his big break. Yeah. And I think he always appreciated that. But the fact that he was working with Paul Williams, who I met, by the way, and at one point, and he's a great guy. I had nothing to talk to him about besides Batman, so I think that kind of, bored him. But I'm like, so Batman. But Mark Hamill. You had Richard Mall from Night Court. These luminaries that had been on TV or in films. Adrienne Barbeau for Catwoman. The actress that played Poison Ivy, and just, Arlene Sorkin, who did a lot of TV. You had very talented people around him, and they just made him better. They all made each other better. And that's why I think the richness of this show really shines through. But the villains are written as if they're the main point. Because I think whether they realize it or not, the creators and the writers of the show wrote these villains to be the stars. And of course, it's Batman's show. But, it wasn't just some heist. There was an episode where it was just a heist. They're trying to rob a bank. It was these guys these men and women with deep internal problems and turmoil and motivations. And their motivations a lot of times were pure, even Poison Ivy, conservation. Joker and Harley, they were nuts. But, her motivation was love for her pudding,
Yeah.
And, she had that. She was obsessive about it.
Obsessed with him.
But, that made her interesting.
Well, and there's side characters, two side characters, like Officer Montoya. I loved her storylines.
Bullock. A bullet for Bullock is one of the best non-Batman episodes ever.
One of my favorite episodes of all time.
God.
It's so damn good because it is relatable.
Yes.
On 100 different levels, dude.
Yes.
It's so good.
Such a great show. But again, every episode kind of had that. And we've talked about Batman the Animated Series before in different ways and in different forms. But, the fact that breaking down every episode, you really get to see the richness of everything. And it's not just one component, too. We talk about the music as well, and the composers and the composition for each episode. The music as a character is so soulful, especially in this one.
Yeah. I mean, like, just the sadness to it, it brings a different arc to it. It'd be one thing if it was just the dialogue.
Yeah.
And the background or whatever, the drawings, but you add the music feel to any kind of scene in Batman, where you can pick out an episode, and in the title card, that's going to be the featured music throughout.
Yeah.
And whenever the villain shows up or a climactic scene comes.
Yeah. And
it's just, man, it's just beautiful. I mean,
really
I don't think that can ever be replicated again.
Not in the same, well, not without a lot of money. And because the thing is, stuff like that costs a lot of money now.
But that's why they won't do it.
Exactly, which is the sick part of it, the sad part. But that's why we have this and we talk about it, because it was such a rich show. And that, Shirley Walker, of course, did this, but she also did with Todd Hayden as Todd Haven. Yeah, right. And, she was also very inviting of other composers, which was great. See, there was a very inclusive atmosphere to this show when it came to the creatives and the production and all that. And they really did a lot to bring in crews that they liked and worked with before, but they had, again, such talented people. And how lucky Warner Brothers was to get this crew of talent at this point in their lives and their careers, where they weren't bitter. They weren't turned off by, the BS of the industry. They were still ambitious. They wanted to put their mark on, on their work and create something really beautiful that would last the test of time. Now, whether they thought about that at the beginning, I don't know, but it feels that way.
Yeah, sure, certainly does. I think the passion was brought to the IP. It wasn't ruined, whereas today, you look at Marvel or DC and they kind of screw up the IPs.
Yeah.
Because they bring in people that don't know the source material, but they obviously knew the source material. They enhanced the comics. They took what was already good in the comics and brought it to life. And I think that's where the imagination of the fans and myself and yourself took place and was able to be like, oh my God, and appreciate it so much, even at our young age at the time, because it just was so much better than what we thought.
Yeah, and they respected the soul of the characters, which was the source material.
Correct.
The source material is the soul of these characters, even if it's campy or weird or like with the spirit, a little inappropriate. You can kind of flub certain things, but as long as you stay true to the basics, the soul of it, the basics of the character, you're going to have a good starting point. And not only did they respect the source material, they loved the comics, but they built on them. And they did it with love, respect, and honor, and that shows in the show. And the deep characterizations that they created for these villains transcended to the comic books, and the comic books are like the core. Any hardcore comic book fan is going to tell you, like, well, the book was better. That whole thing, the book was better. There's not a comic book fan out there that's not going to say, the comic, the movie was better than the comic, unless it really was. And for that to take place, which is why I think the Star Wars sequels failed, is that they didn't take the source material and honestly respect it. Yeah. And these guys did. These men and women did, and they were great, from voice casting all the way to music compositions, to the storyboarding, to the overseas, which I'm sure they loved it too when they were animating it. There's a love on every level for what they were doing. And that's what made this show so iconic, and iconic to this day. The depth of characterization from not just Batman, Robin, Batgirl, or Alfred, but every single villain was created and really just cared for and molded in depth. And they really made, like, Clayface, and all, we'll get to Feet of Clay soon, but, talk about deep characters, and just, even their little one-off characters have depth to them. They're funny, they're human, they're anchor points for the show that make it just magical. And that's why Batman the Animated Series is such a great show to this day.
Yeah, and it's funny, man. I'll close up my part up by saying this, dude. I can't believe it when that show came out, how iconic it was in the watching it real time, first off, and thinking, man, it's going to up the game for everybody else in the cartoon industry, to where they've got to emulate this, or this is the new gold standard. Yeah. And because it blew away everything prior. Yep. But then the funny thing is, it kind of stayed in its own realm. I mean, yes, it was other cartoons tried to copy it, try to emulate it, but no one ever put the detail, no one ever put the time, no one ever had the great storylines as Batman the Animated Series. I couldn't find another cartoon that upped its game that much. If anything, they kind of fell off and went back to the cheap way.
This shaped the industry. This shaped the superhero comic book industry for the rest of its, for a good 15 years, it was about these creators, their direction.
It brought people back to reading comics.
That's right. And this episode is actually rated the top, I think it was, Wizard Magazine in 2005 selected this episode as the best of the series. And there were a lot of lists like that list this episode as the best.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because, obviously, these were mini movies. You've talked about it before.
Yeah. That's what they wanted.
Yeah, and they were just that. They blew away the real movies that you would pay money to see. So watching this, hell yeah. Did I go run home and to watch this when it came on? Yes, because it was must-see TV.
Yep.
You know, like once you saw the first couple episodes, you were hooked, and you wanted to see the next danger that Batman got himself into, or who was trying to take over Gotham City,
Yep.
or if you were going to recognize another character from the comic books.
And I have to say, as time goes on, I identify with the villains more and more. So, not like I want to knock off a bank, but like you look at their motivations, you're like, oh, these are, they weren't completely wrong. And just the ambiguity of the characters is fascinating. You know, it's you see it one way as a kid, but then as a teen or a kid or whatever, whenever you saw it, but then as time goes on, you know, you're an adult, you're like, oh no, that's a little different. You know, I understand like how evil these corporate people are. You know, it's fascinating, but that's, again, part of the magic of this show, and this episode in particular, you kind of had it all. You had corporate corruption, you had selfishness, you know, you had murder, because, you know, basically Ferris Boyle was a murderer. He murdered, you know, Freeze's wife for, you know, all for we knew at that point. But again, that's what made this episode so great, and we're so happy to talk about it. But that's all the time we have for this episode, unfortunately. But, you know, please like, share, subscribe. Yay, subscribe. And let us know in the comments what you think, what your favorite parts of these shows were, your favorite episodes, what you thought of the episodes we brought up. And thanks again for watching. Once again, for TNT, the KCAL Kids, I'm Ty Justice.
And I'm Todd Fox.
See you next time.